Welcome to Melt University. This series will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Now, here's your host, the president and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Happy New Year. 2021, virtual Melt University. We continue to roll on. What a tremendous year it's been, 2020. I mean, crazy year, but we all got through it together. Hopefully, you and your family and everybody are very safe and healthy. And we do appreciate the participation, the tremendous feedback that we've had. We had a young lady visiting who came down from Eastern Michigan yesterday, had heard our podcast, wants to move to Atlanta. She paid us a visit yesterday. We had another student, Ben Laquier, who was a Melt U veteran, senior at Indiana University. So we're just getting tremendous feedback from you guys. Keep the cards and letters coming. We're hearing from our guests that you're giving them some shout outs and some feedback and some LinkedIn's as well. But I've been looking forward to this podcast today. He's a dear friend and a very highly regarded professional colleague of mine, and hugely successful and literally on the forefront of many, many things that are going on into the sports world. So, listen very closely today to my dear friend, Will Funk, who is the executive vice president of the Turner organization. He and I have known each other for several years and worked on many, many Final Fours and March Madnesses together. He's been on the forefront of everything that you see going on with Turner Broadcasting, AT&T, NBA, NCAA, Major League Baseball, esports, Bleacher Report, all bundled up into one. But more importantly, just always been just a very generous guy with his time and kind. And I bring crazy ideas into him all the time, and they may not take them all on, but they certainly will listen with great courtesy. So from a service based and value based professional, he's certainly right there in the top ranks. So, Will Funk, welcome to Virtual Melt University.
Thank you, Vince. That's quite an introduction, and I appreciate it very much. And it's been a pleasure to work with you over the years. I mean, I think it's 10 plus years now
that
we've
crazy?
been working together. Since it is since we acquired the rights to March Madness with CBS, and we were able to start collaborating with you and your agency on the Coca-Cola business and other things, and have done a lot of really great stuff along the way, whether it's the Taste of the Final Four or the television shows. We've made television shows together. We've done lots of really great, groundbreaking things for our brand partners. So we appreciate all the partnership. And look, I'm excited about 2021, and the sports landscape has obviously been a little different for the last year.
Right. That's the understatement. But we have actually had a lot of fun together. We did President Bush one time early about in Texas when we did the NCAA.
We did.
So we've done so many great concerts. We've done so many, Taste of the Final Fours. We've done, former presidents, and I think early on when I met you, I said, the only watch out in this deal is you're going to have to watch out for my dear friend Charles Barkley, because I've been with him for 40 years, and he'll throw you a fun curveball every once in a while. And I think that has probably come true for you, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a long history with Charles as well.
Oh my goodness!
I have funny stories, but one in particular which I could share, which I think is interesting since I work with him now. When I was a kid, I was a ball boy for the Philadelphia 76ers when he played on that team.
No way.
Yeah, it's true. And I remember when he was a rookie, the team was loaded with big stars like Dr. J and Moses Malone and Andrew Toney, other guys. And he was just a new guy from Auburn who no one really knew much about at that point, because he was a bit of an obscure draft pick. He was known for his rebounding in college, and he was a high pick. And I was rebounding balls like for the first week, and the first week of games, and I was not passing him the ball. I was passing the ball to the more veteran players, and he walked up to me. He picked me up off the ground and put me up against the basket. And I won't say exactly what he said to me, but he scared me. And he said, the next time you get a rebound, you're going to throw me the ball. And I'm not saying it nearly as nicely as he
Yes.
did.
Yes.
So that was my introduction to Charles Barkley. And I will say that no one treated me better as a ball
Right.
boy than he did. And that was just, I mean, it was a bit joking, but also a little serious. And he's gone on to be that same human being since I've been at Turner for many years and working with him here and seeing him and how he interacts with fans and our brand partners and really everybody. I mean, he's a tremendous human being and a wonderful person and a lot of fun to watch on TV. So that's my history with Charles. So it goes back
You never,
40 years as well. Yeah.
You had never told me that story. So funny story. That Dr. J, Moses Malone, I believe Mo Cheeks was on that team.
Mo Cheeks was on that team.
Barkley. And the beautiful thing about Charles is he's never changed who he is, and he's actually the most generous guy on the planet.
Really
And he's never, he's never changed. But the first time the Sixers played the Hawks, I was, coming out of SID, and I was very close to Coach Sonny Smith and his daughter and all that. We all actually came over to watch the first time he played for the 76ers for the Hawks. And, he's just an amazing human being, and you can't help but love Charles. But before we dive into a lot of that, we like to sort of bring it all the way back. And I'm glad that you talked about that story about being a ball boy for the 76ers. I grew up in Lower Alabama, but I always wanted to aspire to be a ball boy at the Open and a bat boy for the Atlanta Braves. And I was never able to quite get over that hump, but that was sort of my dream. So we always like to talk about the passion. So you clearly, growing up, had a passion for sports if you were a ball boy for those vaunted 76ers teams. So your career and your profession, it's got to be rooted in passion. And we talk about how important that is with our students. Would you say?
Yeah, I would say it's the most important thing, Vince, is passion and, doing what you really enjoy. And I tell my kids and also young people that I work with that, if you want to make money, if your goal is just to make money, go into finance because that's your best route. But if your goal is to really be successful at something, just follow your passion. And if you follow your passion, you're going to be successful. You may not make the most money, but you can get to the top of whatever the field is that you've chosen to pursue just because you love it and you're passionate about it. And I see that every day in my business, in the media business. I truly love it. And since I was in college and I was coming out of college, I knew I wanted to be in the media business and I knew I wanted to be in sports. Now, for me, I wasn't able to jump right into a great sports job. I had to go work for a television station for a year in Washington, D.C. at an ABC affiliate, get some experience. I was able to parlay that experience of that year at the TV station into a job in New York, working as a rep in the media business. And after 1 year in New York, I started writing letters to Madison Square Garden, which at the time and still does on MSG Television Network, which televises the New York Knicks, New York Rangers. They also own the arena and the teams. And at that time, they also had the New York Yankees television rights. So it was they were a big player in the New York media scene and even in the national scene because New York's such a big market. And I remember carpet bombing the management at Madison Square Garden on the sales and marketing, both on the team side and the network side, until finally I got noticed and I was able to get an interview. And I ended up getting hired by the New York Knicks. So they had the network side, which ran the television piece, and then they had the teams, the Knicks and Rangers, who had their own sales staffs. And I was hired for the Knicks to sell local promotions for the New York Knicks. That was my first job in sports.
That's pretty strong, though. I mean, pretty strong.
It was, but I was very junior, and they had typically had one group kind of selling all the assets for MSG. And at this time, Ernie Grunfeld, who was the general manager of the team, said, why don't we have someone specifically dedicated to selling Knicks promotions, encore promotions, other things in the arena and around the arena that don't include the TV piece? So now I jumped more into the team side of things. And that was really interesting. I will say this. they didn't have office space for me when they hired me. And they said, listen, you're going to have to go sit in the room with all the scouts for the Knicks.
Wow.
So I sat in the room making cold calls, sales calls, with 4 Knicks scouts, one of whom was a guy named Dick McGuire, who had played for the
Oh
Knicks
my
and passed
God. Yeah.
away. Yeah, and a couple other guys that had played and that were, the lead scouts for the Knicks. So I'm in here, the sales guy, and they would just be staring at me all day, picking up my phone, calling people, trying to get calls back, just grinding and grinding. And they're like, man, that seems really hard. I'm like, yeah, it is hard.
Mhm.
Eventually I'll get it. Someone's going to call me back and we're going to get a hook. And I started to have some success, but they watched me evolve. And in between that, I got to speak with the scouts and listen to them talk about different draft picks, which was unbelievable. And we were in this little room, 5 of us packed in there. So it was both very odd in one respect, and probably one of the coolest professional experiences I could have. And eventually I was successful enough. They did give me my own little cube outside with the scouts, but I would have loved to have stayed with the Knicks scouts and just hear them talk about the different players that they were looking at. So it was really neat. And that was my first entree into sports. And it was really my passion and drive that I had to really be relentless to get my foot in the door. And frankly, I had to, do something else for a year and a half and get some experience before I was able to get, one of these coveted jobs with the team.
Well, you took 3 or 4 pages out of our playbook that I want to talk about really quick. The willingness to do what you had to do to get your foot in the door, knowing that it was going to be a grind. Secondly, is the persistence that you had in and our students forget this. In the old days, I had to go to the library and get a resource guide or an encyclopedia or the yellow pages to try to find out who in the
That's
heck
right.
then to write the letter to, right? And
Yep.
and then being relentless in that pursuit of that job, and then willing to be relentless. And that's a great story. Sitting in a room with the New York Knicks scouts, picking up, and by the way, no cell phones back then, probably, right?
That's right. I had a
Yeah,
regular
yeah.
old phone wired in there. So I
Right.
had to make calls sitting at that desk in that little office with those guys literally a foot from me. And they just couldn't believe what they were seeing. They're like, what? They're like, man, you call 50 people in a day. You're like, that's crazy. But yeah, it really, and you realize how hard sales is. And to your point, it's all about persistence. So to get that job, it was persistence. And, now it's a little easier, as you just said, because at least you have the resources online to find out
Right.
people's numbers, get their emails. But, I spent a lot of, better part of a year and a half, almost 2 years. And I would continue to write letters and fax
Oh yeah.
letters back
Oh
then,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
that's what I
Oh
had
yeah.
to do. And you have to be relentless and you have to be persistent. And then that's kind of the way it stays the rest of your career, right? Even when you get to a very senior level,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not persistent and relentless, your ideas are not going to be heard.
Right.
And, and especially in sales. So if you're trying to go to clients, there's a lot of clients that are, they're not going to call you back or they're not going to return the email. And you
Well,
have to be
they
persistent.
they ask you and I what business we're in. We're in the rejection business, and even at
That's
the
right.
level that you're on, you get told no all the time. So they all think, hey, you got this great glamorous job and all this kind of stuff. But and you make it look easy, obviously. But we know the truth of this. But you get told no all the time, right? And we tell our kids, look, you're going to get told no. It's the first letters of not yet, not no, and do not take it personal, right? Give us your philosophy on being told no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll tell you a story first because this is a funny story. Um, so I worked at the NBA for 3 years, and I was running their domestic media sales for the league, working with the network partners. At that time, it was NBC and TNT.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had to run sales for all the NBA controlled media assets, so NBA TV and some other things, their digital business. But that was very nascent at the time. But we used to have meetings with David Stern, who was very, very interested in how well we were doing from a sales perspective. And most of those meetings would result in him screaming at us, telling us
Right.
that we were terrible at our jobs.
Right.
And we were also responsible for signing the league official partnerships. So we would,
Wow.
we would bring in Verizon as the official wireless partner of the NBA, and a number of other deals that we did when I was there. But you get, there are times when, for whatever reason, the league wasn't as strong, or the marketplace wasn't that strong, and we went through some spells where we weren't, bringing in the number of partners that he wanted to see, and we got just absolutely laid into on a weekly basis by him. You guys don't know what you're
by
doing.
The commissioner of the NBA, right?
Yeah, by the commissioner of the NBA. You don't know what you're doing. I'll do it myself if I have to. You don't know. You guys have no clue. And I'm saying it much more nicely than David did.
Oh yeah.
God rest his soul. And I remember one meeting, he's screaming at us, and then at the end, he looked at us. He goes, "All right." He goes, "I know what you do is so hard." He goes, "I actually realize it, guys." He said, "I know what you do. I know how hard it is." For months and weeks and really years for some people, this being laid into by the commissioner of the NBA, one meeting he just finally broke down. He goes, "Listen, I know how hard this is. I know how hard it is to sell these sponsorships." He's like, "Because I was doing it when the league was young, and I had to be out trying to sell sponsorships. And trust me," he goes, "I understand how hard it is." And so hearing that from him, now, of course, the next week we got yelled at.
Just blasting you. Yeah, just blasting you.
It was like, wow, he does understand that this is hard. He actually had to do it when he was a young commissioner, and he didn't have.
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he, learned a lot. And again, it goes back to understanding that it's hard and that you're going to be told no a lot. And, it's finding different points of entry and navigating the maze. And if you get told no by someone, there's someone else that can make a decision in that organization. And by the way, sometimes you just have to move on. You get no enough, and you just say, "All right, I'm just running into a wall here. Go find someone else to talk to. Go find another client to cold call," because, people want, and a lot of people are calling the same, the same brands, the same people, the same clients, because they're the big ones. And sometimes it's not the biggest, where the opportunity is. Sometimes it's finding companies that are on a growth trajectory, and you're the first one to think of calling them. I mean, we used to prospect when I worked at Madison Square Garden and for the Knicks. We used to go through magazines and look. We'd go watch TV and see who's advertising and say, "Wow, could they make sense?" They probably never.
I still do that. By the way, I do that now. Yeah.
Right. Like, I wonder if these people have ever thought about doing a Knicks sponsorship. I mean, they're buying a billboard on the West Side Highway, and it was literally then an you're almost like a detective to find out who is that client, how to get to them.
Right.
And again, it's easier now because you have the internet, but it still takes work. It's work, but it's fun. There's nothing more rewarding than, when you do cold call or when you do negotiate a deal for the first time. There's not a better feeling in the world.
Right. Well, we tell our students a lot because, I mean, I've got a son that's a sophomore at Georgia, and we've got, we work with these kids that are, just coming out right now, and probably the first time they've been thrown in the tumble cycle that we're going through now with this COVID. And what we've told them, and I try not to sugarcoat it with them, and I think they appreciate that, is that you're going to have to be relentless in this new job market. You've got a lot of unemployed people in our industry who might be willing to take a lesser job for a lesser salary, and it's going to put pressure on the entry level job market, because it was already tough. Everybody wants to be in our industry, the sports and entertainment industry. And I use a fishing analogy, 100 casts for 8 job bites for maybe 2 interviews. And then you're going to have to probably more than likely interview in a virtual environment, which means you're going to have to even bring the heat even more. And so from the perch that you sit, one thing we love to hear from the great ones is what gets Will Funk's attention. If somebody is reaching out to him, I like to tell them, hey, leverage those emotional connections, which is showing that you've done your research. Hey, Mr. Funk, I see you started your career with the New York Knicks, and then you were at the NBA, and congratulations on your success at Turner. they're showing you that intangible quality and making an emotional connection that's going to get your attention. So, what gets your attention when somebody, and hopefully you'll hear from some of our kids in this, but what stands out to you, because you are on the sales side, I'm on the sales side, and we're relentless and perfectionist on the sales side. But give our kids some insight and some tips.
Yeah, I think the especially given that sports is such a highly sought after field for many,
Mhm.
um, it is, as you said, highly competitive. What I run into, typically is when candidates are coming to me, it's, well, I want to be in sports. And to
Right.
me, that's not a good answer. And I'm somewhat
Bingo.
reluctant then to really have a conversation, because just to say you want to be in sports, that's not telling me enough. I mean,
Mhm.
so come to me and say, listen, I really want to be in PR. I love sports, but
Mhm.
PR is where my interest is, or sales and
Mhm.
marketing is where my interest is, or production. I want to be producing sports or directing sports. So to just, you don't have to know exactly what you want to do, but to have enough insight and research to understand
Right.
where because sports is, there's all different points of entry. So what a producer in our Atlanta office does, a game producer or even a studio producer or director, versus what I do in New York, is completely different. Even though we
Mhm.
work very closely together, but our jobs could not be more different, and frankly, our skill sets could not be more different. So I think that understanding enough about what part of sports or media really is of interest to you, and where are your skill set, which areas, if you're creative and you love to create, um, you're probably better on the production side than the sales side.
Mhm.
So you really need to kind of understand what your strengths are. So understanding your strengths, identifying within sports or entertainment where you want to apply those strengths, and then going after that. So that's step
Mhm.
one. I think that to me is really important, because there's lots of people that want to be in sports. And then I would say you hit the nail on the head, Vince, which is do your research, understand what we do as a company, what my division does, and
Mhm.
speak to me from a place of knowledge that you've done some research, so you understand what we're trying to accomplish. And then the last piece is really just diversity of thought and diversity of background, and thinking differently, and showing that you have that ability to think about new ideas, because we're constantly looking to move forward, not just keep doing the same things that we're doing, not to
Right.
keep hiring the same types of people we've hired. Like, diversity is driving everything in our business right now. So that's super important, um, that you understand, you know, we're trying to compete against other really big media companies.
Right.
And the way to compete and move forward successfully is going to be building, a staff that is a team that's united and that brings different qualities and different backgrounds to the table.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. And one thing that we try to tell our kids is show Will Funk how you're going to add value to his organization, his company, his sales efforts, and his team. And at least they've opened up the conversation with you, right?
Totally. I mean, I can't stress that enough. That's you couldn't have said it better, which is show me that what you are good at, or what you've
Mhm.
like. And it's not about what you studied in school, but
Right.
what are your strengths? What have you done in real life that would show me that you have an aptitude for sales? You could have been selling, in the summertime, painting, going door to door and asking people to paint their house, or selling knives, or whatever it
Bingo,
is,
bingo, bingo.
and if you've had that experience, to me, that's invaluable. So if you tell
Mhm.
me you spend a summer either cold calling or knocking on doors, and I don't even care how successful you were, but that experience to me is
Mhm.
everything. And so it's not, to me, I'm not as, like, where you went to school and what you studied in school is much less important than real life experiences that you've had. So to the extent to which you can actually go get your hands dirty, When you have summers off, you're a student, you have a number of months every, for the 4 years, 3 years, in between school years where you can really get hands-on experience. And again, it could be working in the register at a restaurant, which to me is more valuable than probably most courses you might take in college.
Well,
So I love that real life experience and people that have actually done something.
well, you just, I mean, you literally hit the nail on the head, which we talk about. It's they're showing their effort, they're showing self-starting, they're showing initiative, and they're also, one thing I tell kids, like, don't just say you worked at a coffee shop. Say, hey, I worked at a coffee shop, working my way through school on the front lines of consumer behavior, serving hundreds of guests per day. That's
Yep,
impressive. I mean,
absolutely.
that's like, okay, you got my attention here. So in the time we have left today, from the perch that you sit in, and you've done multi mega billion dollar deals, NCAA, NBA, Bleacher Report, MLB, DraftKings, the fantasy, the legal wagering, which is coming across the country. From where you sit, what are the future opportunities, and what should our students be doing to prepare themselves to try to win in that space and win those future opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of the really high growth areas, which is there's a huge opportunity in gaming, gamification of
Mm-hmm.
sports,
Mm-hmm.
gamification pretty much of everything that we do in life. um,
Mm-hmm.
but what you're seeing is legalization of sports betting state by state, and we'll be up to probably half the country here before we know it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to accelerate quickly from there. So understanding the macro trends around in and around sports, which really is gamification of it, and I'm not talking about esports in particular. I'm talking about
Right.
gamifying everything about sports, whether it's you're going to pick 10 golfers in the Sony Open and, it could be free to play. It's not just about betting. Betting
Mm-hmm.
is just one small piece. And in fact, the margins in sports betting are not even, are really not that lucrative. What's important is
Right.
the engagement that's being driven by daily fantasy, by free to play games, by other types of games, and by betting. And that engagement, as the games are on television and you can engage on a second screen, is really, really important, and that is the future. So it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be about interactivity going forward. It's going to be about mobile. It already is about mobile. We've seen those numbers explode over
Right.
the last 2 years as video quality, and then you have 5G coming, connectivity, which is going to make speeds much faster. Low latency for sports is very important. Low latency for gamifying sports is incredibly important. So you can actually play along in real time as the games are being played, whether you're in the venue or whether you're at home. So to me, those are the areas. If I was, a young person coming into the business right now, I'd be really excited about. And I think that's where the opportunity is going to be because it's growing most quickly. Traditional media isn't growing that quickly.
Right. Right.
So when we're partnering with DraftKings or FanDuel or these other companies in that space, and we're looking at really what's the future looking like 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and it's going to be where people are going to want to participate in whatever's happening. Can you vote? Are fans going to be able to vote on a football play call at some point? Maybe. Um,
I think so.
there's startup leagues that are they're experimenting with that, and I think there's going to be new ideas that come along and new sports that come along.
Right.
You know, we're talking to different leagues now. Drone racing is really interesting.
Right.
Golf
Right.
is
Right. Right.
interesting. There's all sorts of different iterations of what sports can be. And there's some that are going to be smaller, that are going to have to be aggregated to make sense from a scale perspective. And then you'll have the big leagues, but the big leagues just, they're challenged with growth because
Right.
they've maximized many of their growth opportunities, and without these other things like free to play games, fantasy games, betting, their growth is stymied in many ways. So I think the future is going to be in interactivity and mobile and gamification. And if you can find your niche there, and that could mean you really understand data and analytics, because
Bingo.
now there's a huge need for data and analytics right now with all of these sports betting companies and daily fantasy and free to play. So data and analytics would be the other, I think, macro trend that everyone's looking at, because it's also part of the experience. It's part of the viewing experience now. It's expected, whether it's the Amazon Web Services that you're seeing in the NFL
Mm-hmm.
providing their data in real time throughout the games. You're seeing more and more of that. So those are, to me, the really exciting areas.
Well, and you know what? Here's the beautiful news. In spite of how difficult it's going to be into the job market going forward, this generation of kids is the most sophisticated there is ever. They're digital natives. I mean, my son does things that I still don't understand with his, with his mobile device and how he follows the games and how he's making prop bets and crazy stuff. And so I think as tough as the job market's going to be, the good news is our young students, if they can package and merchandise themselves and get those opportunities, we say that the college campus is the ultimate career laboratory. They're going to have a good leg up in this space. Would you say?
I would absolutely say that is true. I mean, we are leaning on the younger people in our organization more than ever, because they understand this stuff the best. So that bodes for tremendous opportunity. And the other thing I'd say is, once you identify the area where your passion is and your interest, as I was saying, so it's within sports, it's within sales, it's within data and analytics, whatever it is, then I think that the next step is really find a place and get in the door. And don't
Just
worry
get in.
as much about
Yes, yes,
which
yes.
job it is or what the job description is, because if you're talented and you get in the door, you could, and you're at a company that's a significant company that's going to be around for the long haul. You can stay there and invest your time and become a superstar. You just have to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of times the hardest part, but finding the right place for you culturally, and then getting in the door and not worrying so much about how much money you're going to make the first year or what the exact job description is, because once you're there, then it's a lot easier once you're inside than
I
doing it
just
from the outside.
I beg our kids. I'm like, just get in the door, just get in there, and then once you get in there, if you're Will Funk, sit in that room with those scouts and pound that phone, and you'll rise to the top. And we talk to our kids a lot. Will, is that even prior to the pandemic, they get in a job in 2 or 3 months, and they would expect to be the CEO, and they'd get disgruntled, and they job hop and they job hop and they job hop. Now, fortunately, unfortunately, those days are going to be over for a while, just based on what's going on out in the economy and the environment. But I think that you've made a very good point. It's like, be willing to get your foot in there. Be willing to be relentless. Be willing to be persevere and persistent. So, as we close out this amazing podcast, we always like to put our guest on the spot. Like, are there any great books or that you've read in the past, or that you're reading now, or publications or podcasts that you would advocate that our students resource?
Yeah, I would say, the most recent book I read, which is absolutely incredible, and I found it fascinating, was Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix,
Right.
just released a book, and I just finished it, and it's really interesting because Netflix has a very different philosophy. They have a very specific philosophy
Mm-hmm.
about how to run their company, which is they give very direct feedback, and it can come from someone very junior all the way to the CEO, to giving that kind of feedback to each other. And if you read the book, it's really quite remarkable what they've done, and how they transformed that business, to me, is incredibly interesting, from a mail-in, DVD business to the biggest, streamer in the world, that from a subscriber base, at least.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a really fascinating book about business. And Reed And Ted Serenatos, who's his number two, I mean, Ted was working in a video store and was just
Right.
a savant who knew every single thing about television and movies and that knowledge. He didn't go to Harvard Business School. He didn't go to a fancy college, but he
Mhm.
had incredible knowledge, and he realized that and said, wow, this is a really smart guy. And he doesn't have the traditional background
Wow.
that one might have. So I think you can learn a lot from that book. I think it's super interesting as well,
That is a great
for
record.
younger people or like for us. Like I found a lot that I could learn.
Well, it's funny. Only a few years ago, remember you were getting these DVDs in the mail and you would play them and you would send them back.
That's right.
That's
Uh,
crazy.
right. Right. And they pivoted, and people were like, well, "What is this? Like, you're gonna stream these movies? Like that's probably
Right.
not gonna work." And look at them now. So I think it's a
Yeah.
really interesting case study, and it tells you a lot. He talks a lot about people and how they hire, what they
Mhm.
look for, and then once they're there, like how they work together. And I found it very interesting. I highly recommend it for anybody.
Well, that is a great way to end it. And Will, we just thank you so much for your time today. You're going to laugh because I'm going to send you an email. I just found the photograph of me and Barkley and Sherry Smith from that game, and I'm
Oh
going
my
to.
God, you got to email that to me. I'd love to see it.
I'm gonna. And there's two guys in the photograph with mustaches, and you're not going to recognize either one of them. So I'm going to send that to you. But Will Funk, Executive Vice President of Turner Broadcasting, on the forefront of so many things that are going on, in the world of sports and sports business and sports media. Very well on the forefront of this, but I want you guys to listen to this. I want you to listen to it over and over because the themes of his professional and personal success are so relevant today. Relentlessness, persistence, be willing to take on things, be willing to treat people with kindness, be willing to accept rejection, move on, or maybe not accept rejection and move on. And this has been so great today, and I'm really hoping and praying that I actually am able to see you in Indianapolis if we all make it that far for the for March Madness and the Final Four. It's going to be fascinating to see it played in one area, obviously the cradle of college basketball, Indianapolis. But Will Funk, thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you for
today
having me.
and sharing your words of wisdom with the students of Virtual Melt University.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to seeing you soon, Vince. Appreciate everything.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.